So, as most people know on this channel, I am a retail nerd, and as also a Thomas the Train nerd. And how do I combine those two things together? Well, I will be talking about the late 2010s nightmare of Thomas toy sales, and how three retail chains going out of business ruined Thomas, and how we got to this point today. So I'll be talking about Thomas & Friends retail nightmare of the late 2010s. So first, we're going to start with the first major toy store, Toys R Us. Toys R Us was the big seller of Thomas the Train toys when it came to Wooden Railway. Wooden Railway could not fit in a Walmart or Kmart or other stores. Wooden Railway was a high-end merchandise line, so Toys R Us took on Wooden Railway. And however, after Wooden Railway and Toys R Us, after Toys R Us was closing in the late 2010s due to bankruptcy, this led to Wooden Railway getting lower sales as the stores had to go bankrupt, lowering down the sales and the prices of the products, eventually making Wooden Railway become less sold and a less of a place to sell Wooden Railway toys. Because you won't see Wooden Railway toys being thrown into a Walmart anytime soon. So it being sold in Toys R Us and immediately losing that store that it once had to make the sales for Wooden Railway toys is how we got Thomas Wood. It's how we got Wood 2022. While that was a good range, there was nowhere to sell it except for Barnes & Noble. And trust me, who's a mom and their kids going to a Barnes & Noble? Right, like a bookstore. Books and kids nowadays is not going to work. So Thomas Wood Wooden Railway 2022 would have been more successful if they had gotten it into the big retail stores of nowadays like Walmart and Target, which dominate the market. And speaking of that, now getting into the second store, Kmart. Kmart was the low-end retail store. It was more of a lower end than Walmart, but I would say it's more lower end than Walmart. And Kmart took, obviously, Trackmaster and Wood Take and Play and the miscellaneous stuff. They took all the big ticket toys like the Turbo Flip Thomases. I remember getting it from my Kmart. That's what Kmart took. They took the miscellaneous big toys, the little push lawn toys, and then they had Trackmaster minis and like what Walmart had and has technically too. But they took all that, and again, Kmart went into bankruptcy around the same time as Toys R Us. That was literally like suicide for Thomas. Toys R Us and Kmart. Most of the sales, I would think, went from Toys R Us and Kmart, because Kmart and Toys R Us had so many goddamn locations. And with all of them closing, meaning less sales for Thomas products, and what also didn't help was that the bigger retailers that still were around, like Target and Walmart, were not making their Thomas aisles bigger for the demand. They still kept it the same size, and that's how Thomas ended up losing sales. The show was not something to blame on. It was wholeheartedly the bankruptcies of 2018 and 2017. If it wasn't for Toys R Us and Kmart going down, it would probably have helped with Thomas being as successful as it was in the early 2010s. Again, no bankruptcies at the time. And then as soon as the big bankruptcies of Toys R Us and Kmart happened, the lower end retailer for Kmart of Thomas merchandise was gone. And the higher end for Wooden Railway was gone too, and leaving that to now only having Minis, Trackmaster, and Take and Play. All of them would get degraded to what we have nowadays. While the new show could be possibly successful, Mattel's going to have to make the retail market expand the Thomas sections. Expand them, make them bigger instead of a slim shelf as they have it right now. If they do that, they will have more sales because of the bigger sections of Thomas. Barbie, Hot Wheels, they all have huge sections, and you look at Thomas, and it's this little sliver of items. You'll have the You'll have the talking engines, you'll have the diecast engines, you'll have a set or two, and then the Trackmaster 3-packs. That's all you'll have. Whereas back in the day, you had Trackmaster, Take and Play, minis, the miscellaneous big items like Again, like the Turbo Flip Thomas, as I mentioned earlier. And the Minis products, you had other stuff to be putting on the shelves, thus making the shelves bigger. And obviously, with Toys R Us going down as the main holder of the Wooden Railway toys, that's why we lost Wooden Railway, was because of Toys R Us. Toys R Us was the only retailer out there, the big expansive retailer, that had all these Wooden Railway toys. Now, you can't put them in a Walmart, and when they worked in Barnes & Noble, it didn't work either, because of the modern day market for kids not going to books, obviously, their tablets and stuff. So you gotta put them with each other in the stores of Target and Walmart, basically, and I guess Kohl's, but Kohl's doesn't really consistency, and that's also what they need to do. And with the stocking of Mattel merchandise when it comes to Thomas toys is not successful either. It's always empty. You will always see stuff missing and cleared out, especially at my store with the Disney Pixar Cars stuff. Again, Mattel distribution is terrible. And while I could talk about Mattel distribution, I want this video to be over with, and I will mention briefly about how Target kind of had a falling out with Thomas and just hasn't been stocking Thomas stuff at all. You will notice in Target there is not Thomas stuff. At least my quote-unquote local Target, which is like, I guess, almost an hour away from me in Erie, PA, is my closest Target store near me. And I haven't seen Thomas stuff there fully and consistently since 2021. And that will do it for Thomas's late 2010s retail nightmare. Talk to me down in the comments down below if you really do think it was the show at the time that led to Thomas's downfall as we are living through right now. Or was it really the retail bankruptcy? Or was it the retail bankruptcies of 2017 and 2018? Tell me down in the comments down below of what your thoughts and any other thoughts you may have. And that will do it for me, Landon Thomas fan, saying goodbye.